We are going to go through the invention of the wheel all the way to the aeroplane. That is what we discussed and learnt during week 1 to 9 in semester 1. Inventors often rush to patent their inventions as soon as they can. A patent is a kind of government license for an invention. Having a patent makes your invention yours by law. It means that no one else can copy it or pretend that it's theirs. In most countries, a patent protects an invention for 20 years. To apply for a patent, you have to send in a description of your invention along with a clear drawing what it is and how it works. These pictures are based on a patent drawing for two very famous inventions. A patent is your intellectual property. Inventing the wheel. Imagine life without wheels, with no cars, trains, bikes or buses, or even wheelbarrows. Getting around would be miserably slow. Luckily, wheels were invented a long time ago. 6,000 years ago, no one had wheels. But it didn't matter so much as in those days there were hardly any roads. Many people lived in forests, deserts, or boggy swamps, where wheels wouldn't even have worked anyway. They walked everywhere and used animals to carry heavy loads. Nobody knows exactly where or when the first wheel was invented, but the earliest pictures of wheels are around 5,200 years old and come from Sumeria, an ancient civilization in what is now Iraq. They show carts with solid wooden wheels made from planks, pulled by a type of wild donkey. It would have been a bumpy ride, but wheels helped the Sumerians travel faster and carry loads more a lot easier than before. And before that, people think that the prehistoric people used to use rock wheels, but there isn't really any proof of it other than some very round rocks found with prehistoric people, and nobody really knows who invented the wheel. They think maybe that it was just a case of somebody started it and everyone carried on, and nobody really realized it's a new invention. Like the invention of fire, I guess, started the same way. It probably wasn't invented by a single person. Most experts think wheels developed slowly over many years. The bicycle is a simple invention that needs no engine, electronics or fuel. It is so simple, it could have been invented 1,000 years ago. But, in fact, it only came along quite recently. In about 1790, a Frenchman, Mede de Sivrac, invented something called a calorifier. It was made out of wood, but with two wheels and no pedals. But German barrow Carl van Rees saw a room for improvement. In 1817 he designed a version but with a front wheel that could be steered using handlebars. This bike became a popular sport in many parts of Europe. Macmillan also made a bike, but never patented or manufactured his design. Instead, other people copied it and came up with their own variations. carriage maker Ernest and Pierre Michel launched their version in 1850s. It had pedals attached to a large front wheel and was called the Velocipede, French for fast foot. And the bigger the front wheel, the faster a velocipede would go. In 1871, English inventor James Starley designed one with a huge front wheel. He named it the Ordinary, though it looked very strange. It went fast but was very wobbly and caused a lot of accidents. James Starley's nephew John Starley solved the problem in 1885. He linked the pedals to a chain that turned the back wheel as on Macmillan's bike. Both wheels were the same size and the bike was so much safer it was named the safety bicycle. Bikes today still work in the same way. Percy Shaw was born in Halifax, England in 1870. As a boy, he loved inventing his own games and tools, and when he grew up, he built his own roller for smoothing roads. With it, he went into business as a road mender. One dark, foggy night in 1933, driving home from Bradford to Halifax, Shaw nearly drove off the road and over a cliff. He was saved because he saw two small bright lights by the roadside, the eyes of a stray cat, reflecting his car headlights. This gave Shaw an idea for a reflector to mark the sides of the road at night, which would work just like a cat's eye. After trying various designs, he came up with this. You see that there's glass balls with reflective backing, a flexible rubber dome so that the car can't break it, right? And a light, when a light shines into the glass balls, it reflects back again, doing along the same exact path. And this cast iron base or the shoe can be fixed to the road surface and it also won't break. Today there are more cars on the road than ever, and a cat's eye is still in use. Many roads now have cat's eyes along the middle as well as the edges, and cat's eyes are no longer just white. Red ones are often used at the edge of big roads, and green ones are used at junctions. There are even solar-powered cat's eyes that give off their own light, but they are still made to Percy Shaw's basic design. Can you imagine your life if you had to walk everywhere you needed to go, or ride a horse? Can you imagine what our roads would look like if everyone was either walking or riding a horse? Luckily, people have invented loads of ways to get to A to Z. And it all became possible because of the invention of a steam engine by Dennis Papin in 1690. He made an engine that used steam and boiling water. Okay? And then he put the steam engine in a wagon and they made the engine better and better and better, and they put it in trains. Inventors soon realized steam engines worked better with trains than in wagons. Can you imagine being the first one to be in a train? It's like, okay, come guys, let's all get into this funny machine. I know you've been walking everywhere, but let's try this. And it went up to 50 kilometers an hour. That is so insane. Some people were afraid that travel at this huge speed might be bad for them. Guys, Trains go up to 200 kilometers per hour sometimes in today's world. And then in the 1800s, internal combustion engines were invented. How cool is that? Using petrol, scientists or engineers figured out that they can fuel their journeys using gas, and it will internally combust inside their engine. That's so awesome. And then we have a gas powered car powered by hydrogen and oxygen. Okay, that didn't really work very well. I don't know why. It sounds like a pretty good idea because oxygen is everywhere and hydrogen should be easy to make. But and then we have the Ford Model T in 1909. After a century of improvements, cars were faster and ran on gasoline fuel. And then in 1808, the US inventor Henry Ford began manufacturing his Model T car. It was the first car to be mass-produced, and more than 15 million Model Ts were made. That's so awesome. And through the 20th century, many more vehicles with internal combustion engines were designed and built. From the snowmobiles to diggers to buses and many more, like construction vehicles. But human-powered transport never quite went out of fashion. In the 1700s, a Dutch inventor made the first roller skates. In 1984, the skateboard first appeared, and in 1998, a shoe with wheels in the heels was invented. We actually called them Heelys, and everybody wanted one. The ancient Chinese knew that hot air is lighter than cold air, which means it can float above it. They invented hot air-filled flying lanterns that floated in the sky. If you heat air, its molecules spread out and gets lighter. The hot air inside the lantern is lighter than the cooler air around it. The cool, heavy air sinks, and the warm air floats up, pulling the lantern with it. In 1783, two French brothers named Joseph and Jacques Montgolfier decided to use this idea to make a bigger passenger-carrying hot air balloon. The brothers belonged to a paper-making family, so they had plenty of paper. And in 1783, they made a huge balloon out of paper and cloth and filled it with hot air from a fire. The brothers' first balloon flew nearly 2 kilometers by itself. Their next test flight carried a duck, a rooster, and a sheep into the sky. Finally, the Montgolfiers built a hot air balloon that could carry 2 brave volunteers. A scientist and a teacher made their first human flight on the 21st of November in 1783, floating for 8 kilometers over the streets of Paris. The balloon was filled with hot air heated by a huge fire on the ground. Although hot air balloons were invented in 1783, they were very slow and hard to steer. Inventors still wanted to copy birds and fly fast and far on a pair of wings. Flapping wings had proved useless, but in the 19th century inventor George Cayley saw that wings didn't have to flap. Instead, they could stick straight out like the wings of a gliding eagle. He made a series of bird-like flying models with curved, tilted wings and streamlined shape. Finally, in 1849, Cayley built a working glider and tested it with a 10-year-old boy on board. When pulled downhill, it took off and flew a short way. In 1853, Cayley built a new glider and persuaded his coachman John Appleby to pilot it. It flew for 183 meters. Appleby was terrified and complained, "I was hired to drive and not fly." German engineer Otto Lilienthal was the next great glider inventor. To achieve the perfect shape, he studied birds' wings and tails. He built 18 gliders and flew them all himself, making hundreds of flights in 1890s. Sadly, he died in a glider crash in 1896, but his brilliant glider designs paved the way for future inventions. Gliders could only fly a short way because they had no power to push them through the air. The answer was to add a propeller powered by an engine, but the first inventors to try this didn't have much luck because the engines that were available were too heavy. American brothers Orwell and Wilbur Wright wanted to build a powered glider too. As they couldn't find an engine light enough, they designed and built their own one to fit onto their plane, the Wright Flyer. The Flyer's first power test run on 14 December 1903 went wrong when the plane tilted and stalled soon after leaving the ground. But 3 days later, on 17 December, with Orwell Wright on board, the Wright Flyer flew for 12 seconds, covering 37 meters, and it was the first sustained power flight in history. Parachutes were invented long before planes. The ancient Chinese and Leonardo da Vinci both designed earlier versions, but the first known actual parachute jumps happened around 400 years ago. In these pictures, you will see a drawing of Leonardo's chute. In about 1485, Italian inventor Leonardo da Vinci sketched a design for a simple parachute. In the year 2000, skydivers built and tested a version of Leonardo's chute, and it worked. But in 1784, a guy named Louis Sebastian Leonard in France decided to use 2 umbrellas and jump off a building. And he is very lucky. The only thing that happened to him was he broke a leg. But it didn't really not work. And then in 1780s, inspired by the umbrella jumps, they experimented with a new parachute design and with much higher jumps. In 1783, a balloonist, Jean-Pierre Blanquard, showed how a parachute could be used to escape from a hot air balloon and descend safely to the ground. At first, he used a poor little dog to demonstrate the device, but later he tried it out himself. Soon after that, in 1797, a stuntman, André Jacques Garnier, made a thrilling parachute jump from a balloon 1,000 meters or a kilometer up in the air. Early parachutes were rigid with a wooden frame to hold them up, but around 1795 inventors developed folding parachute with collapsing frames, then silk parachutes with no frame at all. These could be folded up into a backpack and opened using a ripcord. This made it easier to carry and store parachutes when they weren't in use. The first planes flew in 1903, and in 1911 the first parachute jumps were made from moving planes. In the 20th century, parachutes became essential equipment for armed forces for dropping soldiers into war zones and allowing pilots to escape from damaged aircraft. Today, people also go parachuting and skydiving just for fun. Since hot air balloons and planes were invented, people have been finding all kinds of new ways and new reasons to take up the air. In 1852, an airship was invented, and it looked almost just like a ship, but it flew in the sky. And in 1816, they used spy balloons. And they used this for viewing the battlefield in American Civil War. Can you remember the Civil War? And the early 1900s, the biplane was built by the Wright brothers. And then the monoplane. Bi means two, so there's two wings. Monoplane one, so they have one wing. And in 1914 the airliner was invented, and 1914 to 1918 there was fighter planes that they used in the First World War. That's coming up in history in semester 2. And then there was a jet plane in 1930s, helicopters in 1936, a jet airliner in the 1940s, and even stranger things like pedal-powered planes, like a bicycle crossed with a plane. That's fun. And then in 2007, a full-length double-decker plane, the A380, can carry up to 555 passengers. That is double the amount of people that is in our school, guys.
That's all, folks.